I want everybody here to say his name. Alonzo Ashley. Alonzo Ashley. Alonzo Ashley. This is the person we're here to acknowledge this evening. I want to thank everybody who's in attendance. This has been a 10-year uphill battle. The zoo administration has shifted hands multiple times, but what we are doing today is monumental for the Denver community, for healing, for some level of accountability and justice to be served to the loss of life that took place on this property.
On July 18, 2011, 29-year-old Alonzo Ashley was at the Denver Zoo with his girlfriend. The temperature that day was in the 90s, and by late afternoon, according to Ashley's girlfriend, he was highly overheated and vomited. He then walked over to a fountain to try and cool down, and a zoo staffer confronted him asking if he needed help. When Ashley declined, the zoo staffer called zoo security and Denver police. 8 police officers arrived on scene, and Ashley ended up face down, tased. He vomited twice more and began convulsing and stopped breathing before paramedics arrived. The coroner's report ruled Ashley's death was caused by cardiorespiratory arrest brought on by heat, dehydration, and exertion during the struggle. No charges were filed against anyone involved.
So thank you everyone for coming, family, friends, community. This cooling station means so much to our family, especially Gail. Everyone here, and even some not here, have fought so hard for justice, accountability, and for Alonzo's death to not just become another statistic under various reports, to allow him to be remembered. Alonzo deserves this, and for his name to live on in an empowering light versus the dark stereotype he was put under 10 years ago. He was someone special. He was generous and kind, sympathetic and funny, an infectious laugh, a big old kid. He was loved by so many, and for those who were ever lucky to be in his presence, you know how he loved you back, especially the kids. From buying fireworks to Halloween costumes every year, food for barbecues, and having sleepovers where he gave them tons of junk food and video games, whatever their hearts desired, even though us parents said no. Oh, and birthdays. Let's not forget about the birthdays. The kids were so excited to have Uncle Alonzo do something for their birthday. He always had to one-up everyone at birthday parties with gifts and excitement. Only the biggest and only the best. One time Monty, his niece, saw a bike vendor on Colorado Boulevard, and she told him it sure would be nice to have one of those bikes. And by golly, if he didn't make it happen by whipping around in traffic and going back to get that bike just to please her. That's how he was. One November day, Alonzo was on his way to his mother's house when he noticed a man walking down the street without a shirt. He stopped to ask him if he needed a ride. The man said no. However, Alonzo then took his shirt off and gave it to him. The following summer, he stopped to help a senior female who was wheelchair bound, trying to work in a yard. She told me that she remembered him, and he was a great help to her that day. This is just a small sliver of who he was and what he was about. He poured into us all. He made us proud, and we hope he's looking down now proud. This memorial is more than just water. It's so much more for us who deeply miss him. We now have something for him that the whole community will love and enjoy like we did.
A decade later, we recognize my brother the way he deserves to be recognized. I don't have much to say but what's in this poem. So without further ado, this is Alonzo. It goes like this. Alonzo's birthday was the day before mine, so to make us feel special, our moms made us share a cake. He was a kid who always used his fingers for forks and the frosting for Spider-Man face paint. Well, these days, forks are no challenge, but birthdays are kind of hard for Alonzo. See, he hasn't had one since 2011, courtesy of Denver police, who snuffed the candles in his lungs with a taser shock for every year of his life that he breathed. They said that his strength was superhuman, like Spider-Man. An altercation with the zoo rent-a-cop got out of hand. They treated the animals there more humanely. This black man, taking his last breath yards away from African creatures in cages. And I know that there's a metaphor in there somewhere, but all I remember was his name on the news. Wondering why some disturbance in the force hadn't warned me. Wondering if the sound waves played tricks on the air. Wondering if he indeed just walked through heaven's gates. Why I wasn't the one greeting him there. See, 8 years before, Denver police handcuffed me to a chair and beat me like I stole the tax dollars I already paid them, my parents' investments in me, in their crosshairs. Every gas mile, every meal, every storybook lesson rests in the hands of Uncle Sam's new slave patrol weapons, but when the beast spit you out alive, bathed in the sweat from the moment you thought were the last before you died, who teaches you how to deal with regretting survival? When the shame at its second chance got you nearly suicidal, Alonzo, it should have been you writing this poem. Instead, I speak the ballad of another dead soldier. In this war we never asked for, old as history's pages, you and I, African creatures born into uniform, doing life in invisible cages. This is the ballad of another dead soldier. When the bullets kept going like our families had to, and ricocheting off the tombstones, I keep his taste buds in a graveyard that sings in my mouth like I can somehow speak their alternate futures into this one, like somewhere magically right now. Trayvon Martin is a model. All 6'3" of his now chiseled frame standing tall like the pride of his mama. Beard game on 100 like his daddy, clean. Like Zimmerman's hands had he just followed directions. And somewhere, Oscar Grant is an actor alongside Michael B. Jordan, never knowing that he's staring at his movie reflection in Fruitvale Station. It's just another train stop. And somewhere right now, George Floyd's lungs never paused for a moment of silence. His heart never called in black between the beats. Instead, he screamed, "I can't breathe," from laughter that Christmas when his daughter got licorice stuck between her teeth. And somewhere, Sandra Bland just received her first nonprofit grant. She and her fiance expect a child this November. All because a cop swallowed his pride in a Texas traffic stop in an incident he barely remembers. These are the lives in Black Lives Matter. The haters never hear past the black. Just get triggered from being awakened from their raceless slumbers. Content with real destinies reduced to faceless numbers. And somewhere, Alonzo Ashley made it out of that zoo. And somewhere tragically, I made it onto the news. And this poem was never written. And you're not in these seats, just a candlelight vigil held in my tomb. But for reasons I cannot name, I survived. Here to eulogize the fallen, and I must go on coping with the guilt of being alive. So won't you join me in singing their songs? Our voices ringing out like the battle of Jericho. Into the blue wall of silence falls. Into the blue wall of silence falls. Into the blue wall of silence falls. Rest in heaven, big homie. We love you.
When we see somebody in distress, our first sign shouldn't be call somebody else. Our first sign should be, how can I help? Not to be afraid of the person. Distress looks different to many people. How can I help? Maybe if someone said, how can I help, we wouldn't have been here today. And Alonzo would still be here. Maybe if the carelessness of the then staff, untrained staff, maybe we wouldn't be here today. Maybe if the callousness of the officers at that time weren't as callous, we wouldn't be here today. But Alonzo would. But yet we are. And it's a blessing that we can see it to move forward, to touch someone else's life. I thank God for the administration that finally moved in and had the courage to do this. As brother Alex said, it's never been done. It certainly hasn't been done in Denver. In Denver, we can see monuments with mayors' names and street signs with governors' names and all kinds of, but regular folk, no. So this is a big deal. This is an honoring time. It's an honoring time. Let us never forget Alonzo's name. Let us never forget why we have to remember his name.
So I'm going to start out and talk a little bit from the medical perspective. And I want to say that medicine is an art and a science. And I always add, with a sprinkling of common sense and some compassion. We know that as it pertains to health, we often use cognitive shortcuts, what we think we already know about a situation, what's at the top of our brain. And there, of course, is biases. We all have bias, but in the instance of health, these shortcuts and biases can lead to death. I think that was an element here. The human body is intricately made, and in general, the elements of the human body is relatively the same for all human beings. However, there are some things about the Black body that manifest differently. The skin is one of those areas. The skin happens to be the largest organ of the body, and it also is the first thing that here in America we see. Is someone light-skinned, dark-skinned? That defines whether or not we're Black, how we look here in America. And melanin is a pigment that dictates the hues of the skin from the light brown to the darkest of dark black. And one of the signs that's mentioned in heat-related illnesses is whether there's redness or flushing. Now that might seem obvious. Most of the textbooks will show you redness and pinkness in white skin, so it's very easy to see. In our training, even to this day, you see very little that mentions how diseases and things look in the Black skin. So redness may not be that easy to discern in people who have not seen Black skin and redness in Black skin. That could have been part of what happened that day. I've seen this happen in the healthcare environment where people aren't able to see redness in the skin. But there are other things that can be looked at. And there are other factors that can help you figure out what's going on. I'm going to deviate a bit from the medical side and say, people don't often come to the zoo to commit a crime. They don't often come to the zoo to commit a crime. So if someone's at a fountain trying to cool themselves, assess the situation and consider medical personnel rather than law enforcement. If someone's trying to commit a crime at the zoo, which would be unusual, would they go to a watering station? You should assess someone to see what else is going on. You don't see redness in the skin, but is their skin warm? Are they sweating? Does their breathing seem odd? Is their mental state different? Because they didn't come to the zoo to commit a crime. Once you open your mind and set your biases aside, then you might be able to observe. You might be able to show some compassion and use a little common sense that no, they didn't come to the zoo to commit a crime. They were hot. Their body told them to cool down. And instead of medical personnel, police officials were called. And the rest is history. So if you put forth your cognitive shortcuts and your biases, someone can die. And we could be here on a day like this, memorializing someone who simply needed treatment from the medical system